Hey everybody, thanks for being with us today. If you're new to New Day, welcome. And if you're a dad today, including my own, happy Father's Day. We hope you are just really well celebrated today. I realize as I say that for many people, your relationship with your dad is complicated, or it's painful, or it's non-existent. So we get to a day like Father's Day and it's a tough one emotionally. My hope for all of us in this time that's set aside to honor fatherhood, that we could take some time to think about our Heavenly Father. What is it that you most appreciate about Him right now? What are you needing most from Him today? Take some time to identify that and then tell Him about that. Well, we have a lot that's happening right now at New Day, so I want to dive right into these announcements with you. First off, this Wednesday night, June 23rd, is our next leadership gathering down at the Hub at 6:30 p.m. We're in this relaunch phase right now, and it's an all hands on deck situation. So if you'd like to be there, we'd love to have you there. Just let us know. Send us an email at info@newdaynw.com. Also coming up, next Sunday will be our next in-person worship gathering. That will be at the Hub. We'll have 2 service times. Again, you can pick the one that works for your schedule. Just register for that on our website, newdaynw.com, and we would love to see you there. A little further out, you can mark your calendars for a fun event coming up July 23rd. That will be New Day night at a Rainiers game. That's always a popular event, so be sure to reserve your tickets now because they will go quickly. And you can just let Kevin know, email him at kevin@newdaynw.com how many tickets you need, and he will get you details about that as well. But the really big news that we have for you this week is that we have finally been able to dial in on where we're going to be meeting in the fall, and that is the Dumas Bay Center in Federal Way. We'll be meeting in the Knutson Family Theater there. It's a great location for us and affords us the opportunity to start back up without having to scramble to get our teams all fully in place, because there's minimum setup that will be required of us there. So we're really thankful that will be able to be settled and allow us to focus on the other aspects of really rebuilding as we emerge from this pandemic. So be praying for us about that. More details will be coming soon. This morning, though, Kevin Stigers is going to be bringing the message. Kevin heads up our ministries to students and their families. And, Kevin's spoken many times before here, but it feels like this time in particular is a real testimony to God's grace and faithfulness, because even just a few months ago, this would have been impossible health-wise for him. And his story humbles me. He is just an example to me of what patient endurance really looks like. So will you pray with me as we prepare to hear what it is that God has put on his heart to share with us today? God, thank you so much for your faithfulness to us, and that you are the perfect Father, that we can always count on you being there as our defender, as our support and our strength, and full of grace and compassion for us at all times. So God, we want to honor you today as we honor all the impact that fathers have on our lives, our human fathers. God, thank you for them as well, and how we have all been shaped by them. Those of us who are fathers, God, give us strength and wisdom to look to you for how we parent. God, I do pray for this time in your word as Kevin leads us. Would you open our hearts and minds to what you have for us today? Speak through him, and God, use this time to build us up in the faith and to strengthen your church. We give this to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, good morning and welcome to New Day Church online. We're glad that you're here. If this is your first time joining us, finding us, we're glad that you're here and welcome. And if you've been here 1,000 times, welcome. We're glad to connect or try to through technology as best we can as well. So, morning, or whatever time you're watching this. This morning we're going to be talking about foundations and what are they and what does God have to say about them and how does that impact our life, or do they? And in this picture you see here, this is the Leaning Tower of Pisa on this title slide. And it's in Pisa, Italy, and it's famous. It is a beautiful, amazing piece of architecture, but it's also primarily it's famous because it's leaning, and it has over the centuries, and it hasn't fallen yet. So people travel from around the world to take pictures like this. Here's a woman who is doing her part to hold it up to keep it from tipping over. Here's a couple who's got in on the action. They are going from the other side, who are holding it up, or from the other angle. They are holding it up together, working. It's good teamwork. Here's a gentleman who shot it in such a way that he looks taller than the tower. It looks like he's a couple 100 feet tall. This guy, I don't know. I tip my hat to him for doing it, either photoshopping it or doing it in real life, but it looks like he's a soccer goalie who's jumping up, trying to do a bicycle kick and kicking this thing right up against the Leaning Tower of Pisa. This is one of my favorites. This lady who has created the Leaning Tower of Pisa ice cream cone. Well done there. And this is my favorite. It's man's best friend. It's the dog using its forepaws to do its part to keep the tower from falling over. So here's a little history about the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Well, first, it was not always called the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It was originally just called the Tower of Pisa. Construction began on the tower around 1173, and it was completed in the mid-1300s. So it took a little while, which it did back then with big grand projects like this. It was built primarily out of white marble on the exterior with columns all around it. And it was designed to be a bell tower, a cathedral bell tower for the Cathedral of Pisa, which is the building located right next to it. When construction was barely started, though, as they began working on it, it wasn't very long before they realized, it's not straight. It's actually leaning. It was straight, and as we build it more and more, it's leaning. The tower began to slowly lean, and engineers estimate over the years, over the centuries, it has averaged 1 to 2 millimeters of movement every single year. It's leaning, and it keeps leaning, and it keeps leaning. By 1993, the lean had grown to an alarming rate, engineers called it, of 4.5 degrees. And they say it was alarming at 4.5 because they had calculated prior by I watched this documentary on Discovery about all of this, more detailed than you probably want to know, but they watched and they studied and they figured out the critical angle of where it was safe and not safe. And they determined at 4.44 degrees or less of a tilt was good, was safe, it was not in danger. But once it hit 4.45 degrees or more, it was now in danger of falling and collapsing. So once it passed 4.44, which was around 1990, they actually closed it. This is a picture of what it looks like if it was, or a drawing of what it would have been like straight. If it had come out like they were shooting for, it would have been straight, and it actually would have been that height. It's 60 meters is what it was designed to be. And it sank down, though, as they built it, and actually sunk to the right as they built it. So you can see it's not as high as they thought, and it's not obviously as straight either. The outside is wrapped in those columns. It has each of those columns has a sculpted head on the top of it, and it is a beautiful architectural building. But again, people go there because of the lean, and lean is caused by the soil underneath it and by the foundation that's supporting it. So how does that relate to our lives? How does that relate to our lives? What does God have to say about that? And this morning we're going to be looking at a parable out of Matthew 7:24 through 27. And Jesus said this: "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. He continued on and said, but everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who builds his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. It looks like a simple parable, doesn't it? And it is in many, many ways. But I want to point out something as we begin talking about today's sermon, is that the parables that are in the Bible, the history that is recorded, the teachings of Jesus, the poetry, all the different parts of it are not there by accident. That God put every single one of those there intentionally for us. Almost like a roadmap for like, this is how life works. This is how this world works around you. And it seems complicated and not connected, and yet it is. It's all connected. And this parable has great importance, actually, of how we, as people, choose and do build our lives. And the foundations those lives are resting on. And sometimes the problems if we don't choose well. The point out of this parable, one of the main points as we move on, we have some other points coming, a number of them, is what we build our lives upon, it matters. What we build our lives upon matters. In that verse, they talked about the wise man builds it on the rock because it was solid and the structure itself didn't collapse. And the foolish man did it on sand that shifted, and eventually it collapsed when all the storms of life, which do come, happened. We get to choose that. God didn't force us to. So what we build our lives upon, it matters. But God's saying, here's how you do it well. Here's the design I have for you, but it's up to you. I won't force you. Psalm 127:1 says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. And it highlights from the psalmist this idea of the things we do in our lifetimes. When we are working out of our own strength solely, out of our own abilities mentally and otherwise, they are really in vain in the big scheme of things if they're aside from God. If we're not including God in our life, if we're not partnering with God, the things we're doing are really in vain. They're like the house that's built on that foundation. It's not solid. It's going to have problems, and eventually it will have really big problems. Also in that parable, it talks about sand versus rock. The idea of that sand being unstable and rock being very stable and doesn't really move. And sand, interesting thing about Pisa is in the ancient Greek, Pisa can actually be translated as a swampy or boggy area. That was Pisa. Back then it had all these rivers, and it was low-lying territory, ground, and it had lots of sand and lots of clay. And it was not, and still is not, great soil for building and supporting things. Our lives are like that. We get to choose, and where we build, it matters. What that foundation is, what they're resting upon. Here's a picture of a lighthouse. It's another tower that's actually built upon rock, like we talked about. And this is a beautiful, picturesque postcard. And you can see in the very corner, there's a guy who looks like he's fishing on that point. It looks like a wonderful image. But the lighthouse itself, those buildings and everything, are built in a manner to support and to uphold themselves, take care of themselves when bad weather and storms and things like this happen. Because lighthouses are subject to amazing, awful storms, and they take a beating. Sometimes the waves that come and impact them, like this one, are massive. That wave is almost going over the top of that lighthouse. And if the very foundation that structure is built upon, or the structure itself as it was built, wasn't built solidly, it's going to collapse. If that was a Leaning Tower of Pisa, that thing would be ripped off in about 10 seconds. This is one of my favorite lighthouse photos, and this guy, I don't know who it is. I assume it's the lighthouse keeper. Standing there as a wave is impacting the back of that lighthouse, and it's about to envelop the lighthouse. And he's going to, I'm assuming, duck in real quick and slam the door shut and bar it. And I have to think he has this great confidence that that structure is going to be okay. And he's not going to die. And that the foundation that holds that structure is solid, and the same thing. What we build our lives upon matters, just like those towers. So here's some things to remember as we are building our lives, as we go. Number one, and there's about 6 of these steps. I'll kind of talk about each one quickly. Number one is we build our lives step by step and day by day in the choices we make as we go. How we build our lives, that metaphor that Jesus used of building the house is a metaphor for how we build our lives. How we do that is the choices we make every single day. We choose wisely, foolishly, and I don't know about you, but I choose foolishly sometimes. I don't mean to, but I end up there sometimes. It figures out, or I figure out eventually. But we do. We choose every day, and we build that house. We build our life. Number 2, the building, that process of building that we were just talking about day by day, step by step, it happens every day, and it never ends. That's a good thing. Sometimes we want to be done with stuff in life. I know sometimes as a homeowner, I don't want more home upkeep or maintenance. I want the building to be done. But that's not how it is. In reality, there's always something to do, good and bad. And that's a good thing in many ways, though, because sometimes in our relationships, in our lives, we think this is what it is. It's permanently fixed that way, or it's not going to work anymore. When in fact, tomorrow is a new day, and there is hope in that. And in that, we can choose to build again tomorrow, and to start over, and to add to it, or to take away, and to remodel. And that building happens in 2 ways too. It happens reactively, it happens proactively. Reactively, something bad happens, and we have to react to it. In our house a while back, we had a plumbing leak. We had to do a remodel. We were not wanting to do or planning to do, but it had to be done. That was a reactive thing. And we do that in our lives. Sometimes something negative happens, and we react negatively. We build something out of it. And good can come out of bad things. It also can be proactively. And proactively, we choose to, like in a home, repaint a room, remodel a kitchen, whatever it is, plant some new plants out back. We can proactively add or change. But this building process we're talking about, it never ends. It's always every day. And number 3, our relationships also have foundations. Our relationships have foundations, just like a house or structure does, just like our very lives do. So does every relationship we have, from friends to coworkers to my wife, CJ. For a friend, you may have a relationship built on a foundation of mistrust or doubt, and maybe it's not really a good friendship. For CJ and I, we have always tried, and I'll just say this before I even say these words, we failed many times, and we don't get it right all the time. But our goal, our hope, and our day-by-day choice is to try and build our relationship on love for each other, on trust and being a team, and hope and trusting in God. That is the foundation we try and build upon. Do we do it right all the time? No. None of us do. But that's what we're trying to do. And I know those things are solid, and they'll support us. So relationships have foundations. All of ours do. Number 4, our foundations sometimes need repair work. They need repairing. They do. As a homeowner, they do. We had a home, actually, the foundation was bad. It was built on an area that didn't support it, and they actually had to come and lift up one side of our house a little bit. So do our lives. Our lives sometimes need some repairing. Sometimes we look around and we're like, how did I get here? You ever feel like that? How did I get here? What is going on? This isn't working well. What can I repair or fix to change this. Our foundations can be repaired, what we're building our life upon. Here's an image of the Leaning Tower of Pisa again, but this is a different one. It's a shot from the steel cables. They attacked these massive cables and connected it to the Leaning Tower of Pisa structurally to support it. When it got to a point of leaning so much, they were afraid it was going to fall over. And this was part of their process of stabilizing it so they could repair it. What happened was they ended up closing the Leaning Tower of Pisa from 1990 to 2001 for repairs. Once it got too unstable, too unsafe, you could still come from afar and watch it and look at it, but you couldn't go in anymore or too close to it. Over time, over that period, they used multiple methods. They used cables, like we just saw in that picture, to support it. And while they was supported by those cables, they used, they excavated, they dug soil out and removed the problem areas from underneath it. And the foundation wasn't built strong enough or big enough, so they tried to shore up that as well. They used counterweights on the Leaning Tower of Pisa to try and get it to lean against gravity by using counterweights. So they tried a number of things. The lean through this process was eventually reduced to about 4 degrees. So actually a huge success compared to what it was at 4.5 and well inside the parameters of being a danger to collapse. Deciding, the experts did, that it was safe to reopen again. They determined it was safe from collapsing, and they determined for 200 years it's now safe. So there's your window. If you want to go to the Leaning Tower of Pisa, you can get inside and go see the actual thing for 200 years. Although after that, they don't guarantee their work. Here's a few takeaways from that, from their repair efforts of the foundation and how to fix what something was wrong and they wanted to repair it. It has application for us too. Exactly what they did, we can apply to us. First, they kept trying over the years. They kept trying. They didn't give up. Over the centuries, it was always leaning, and it got worse and worse and worse. And it had been repaired or attempted to be repaired multiple times, and many of them failed. But they didn't just go, well, it's not fixable. They kept trying. The second one is they used a variety of methods, varying methods to repair. And sometimes, like we just saw, they coupled different things together, like the counterweights and the cables and digging out and adding new things. And they did different things. They kept trying. And as technology got better and ingenuity came along, they figured out with technology, they tried new things. They used various methods. They didn't give up and let it collapse. Sometimes when things are really hard and they're just going worse and worse and worse, it's easy to just say, I give up. They didn't give up. They didn't give up and they didn't let it collapse. They kept trying. And that's an important one. All of those for us, we can do those. We can do those in our lives. We can keep trying. We can choose to. We can choose to try other methods in our lives. We can choose to say, I'm not giving up on this marriage that seems like it's falling apart. Our marriage isn't. I love CJ. We have our struggles. But for the marriage that is on the brink of divorce, and it seems like there's no hope. There's always hope. They didn't let it collapse. They chose not to. We can do that in our relationships too. Here's some specific applications out of that, some subpoints to highlight. Attaching the cables of support for us in our lives, what that looks like is having others, the help of other people in our lives, friends, a DNA or a small group, people you get together with regularly, but they're people that they know you and are connected to you and can offer support to you. We keep bringing up to both youth groups for high school and middle school, like asking the question, who is your circle of friends? Who's your people? Do you have people? Because when we are alone, feel like we're alone, it feels like we're not supported, and it's easier to topple. It's easier to tip. The second one is dealing with or removing problem areas. They excavated out. Well, they had it stabilized. They dug out from underneath and did work underneath, added to the foundation and removed some of the bad soil, the problem parts, and added good, solid things. We can do that too. We can do the hard work. We can choose to, of repairing, working on it, or removing problem areas in our life. We can go to counseling. We can talk to other folks. We can pray to God about this. God, How does this even work? We can work on removing problem areas in our life just like they did for the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And the last one is looking and listening to what God has to say. When the workers completed the work of fixing the foundation or repairing it, they didn't just decide to do that. They listened to the experts who over the years and decades had been studying and planning it, and the structural engineers and the soil scientists and all these different people who said, okay, this is the best plan. This is the way to do it. And that's just like with us. The person who created our very selves, us, who loves us, who created all of this, says this is the way. By choosing wisely, by choosing to build your life on solid ground, not on sand. By being wise, not foolish. By reading God's word, by talking to him about things, we can listen to the expert on our life and all of our lives. That's a choice. Number 5. Our life, like a home, can be moved to a new foundation. It's a funny thing, but sometimes you drive down the road and you see this. And you see a truck hauling an entire home down the road, moving it somewhere. And either the foundation was bad and they wanted to save the house, or they needed to get off the property for whatever reason, and they actually pick it up and they build a new foundation for it, and they actually set it down on something that's solid, and they move it. Our lives are like that. Sometimes we get to places where we know we're building our lives on things we shouldn't be. I did in my 20s. I walked away from God. I wasn't living for God or building my life on that at all. I was building my life for myself and a bunch of awful choices. And at one point, through CJ's help and some other folks in my life, and God really working on me and being patient with me, I realized, I don't want to do that anymore. And I want to build my life on something that matters and something that's good. We can move our homes move our lives to new foundations. Sometimes, though, our lives feel too far gone. Sometimes they feel too far gone. Nope, it's not even savable. It's not even worth trying to repair it or move it like we're talking about here. And that's not the case. That's never the case with our lives. And I want you to hear that. I'm going to play a short video clip here, and it's about a 1-minute video from Carrie Levang. And Carrie was talking to our high school youth group, and this is a clip I want to play, and then we're going to talk briefly about it at the end.
It's kind of a big part of my story because I didn't grow up in a home where Jesus was the center, where our family was sort of living out of the center of understanding who God is and who we were, and so no one was shepherding me in that way to understand any of that. And so I lived a little bit of a reckless life. Actually, kind of a lot bit of a reckless life. And so I feel like I've got some things to say, even though it's been a long time ago, because Jesus has brought me a long way. And if I have nothing else to tell you, if you leave with nothing else tonight, I want you to leave knowing that there is a God. His name is Jesus. He loves you. He died for you. And you're never too much for him. And there's always a way back, no matter how far you've gone from him. His invitation is always to come. Isn't that amazing? We can never go too far from God's reach to scoop us back up and bring us back home to himself.
I hope you heard her say, there is a God. He loves you. He died for you. His name is Jesus. And you can never go too far. You can never do the stupidest thing where you're not able to be close to God or see God if you look. You're never too far down or too far away. Nothing we can do. Nothing. God is always there for us if we look around. And he waits patiently. And he calls and he seeks. And he's working on us, but he also lets us choose to build foolishly or to build those lives wisely. But we are never too far We are never too little or not enough. We've never done something. We've never done something that can't be forgiven, and we can come back to God. I hear middle schoolers and high schoolers as students sharing stuff like that. Like, if you only knew the things I've done, my parents will never forgive me. If God, and he has to, he must know the things I've done. I could never, turn to him or trust him or be in a relationship with him. I've done too much. I'm dirty. I'm unclean. I've done too much. My life is not repairable. It's not movable to a new thing. That's not true. Number 6, what our lives do look like, though, is not like the house and the image and the life on Pinterest or social media, where everything's perfect and everyone's hair's done and the house is this cookie cutter perfect little thing that's like, wow, look at that. Our lives, number 6, is our lives look like the Winchester House. And some of you may know about the Winchester House. It's a mansion down in California. This is a picture of it. Older picture. The Winchester Mansion was built long ago in Northern California, and it was from the widow of the man who started the Winchester Rifle Company. They made a fortune. He passed away, and she just had tragedy after tragedy in her life, and she decided to take her fortune and move to California and buy this property and build this home, build this house. And the thing she did, though, was in this house that makes it interesting, she decided she needed to keep building on it every day, 24 hours a day almost, for the entire rest of her life. And what came of that is this picture where this house shows room after room is added and things are disjointed and levels were added and things collapse sometimes. And inside this house, there are stairways that go to nowhere. It just stops because it hits the ceiling. And you can go into bedrooms and open this exterior door and you're like, oh, where's this go? And there's a 30-foot drop off. It goes to nowhere. And there are things that didn't work. They tried and it failed. But she just kept doing it. Some of the things were crazy. They had whole levels of this house collapse. And she just kept building and building and building. That is what our house looks like if you want an image. It's not this Pinterest, social media, everyone sees this perfect image. It is this. It is a disjointed house that has failures and successes. And it looks all disjointed at different levels, and it's been built upon and built upon and built upon because we are building our lives every single day as we go. And it doesn't always look like that neat image people think of. It looks more like this. So as we wrap up, we'll get to the so what. So we've talked about the Leaning Tower of Pisa, we've talked about foundations, we've talked about the Winchester House, we've talked about God's parable of the builder. So what? What's the takeaway? What does this really mean? The first point is this. God's invitation for us is more. It is always more. As we are building our lives, his invitation for us to step into, to accept, is more than what the world has to offer. Is more than sometimes what we seek and chase after. It is the life of meaning and significance and love and acceptance and hope. God's invitation for us is always more. Proverbs 24, 3-4 says this. By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. And what the psalmist is saying there is that the house, again, it's a metaphor for our lives. It's built by wisdom, by choosing wisely, like we talked about, as opposed to foolishly. That's the way that house is going to stand. That's the way it's well built. And through understanding, as we learn and knowledge, it is established and all that stuff is filled. It is made into this wonderful house, like the Winchester House. I look at the Winchester House and I say, that's a beautiful house, because that's what we look like. It's not the perfect image. Social media. It is real life. That's what we look like. And it's wonderful. And it's crazy, but it's wonderful. And God sees that and says, I love it. I love you. Here's a quote I want to bring up from D.L. Moody. And it is for all of us here, for dads, for grads, for everybody here. And it is this, as we're talking about building our lives, as we're talking about how do we do that well and wisely, I like this quote, and it says this: our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of succeeding at something that doesn't really matter. And that quote has two parts. Our greatest fear shouldn't be a failure, because failure is a part of life. Failure, unfortunately and fortunately, is part of life, because failure is hard, but it also helps us learn and to grow, and it shapes who we actually are. It's costly, but it sometimes failure is the best teacher. Don't be afraid of failing. Try new things. Look at that picture. Look at the mountain and the cliff on the left side. Go climb your mountains. All of us. Go chase your dreams. God gave you those desires. God gave us this world. Go do all that stuff. In our lives, don't be afraid of failing. Try to do great things that matter and are meaningful. And then the second part of that quote, though, he says, but be afraid of succeeding at something that doesn't really matter. We can succeed in life at things that don't really matter in the big picture. I've known people, and maybe you have, who they were incredibly successful financially. They started their own company. They were powerful. And yet, at the end of their lives, they were miserable. And they look back and they're like, what does it all mean? What was it all for? Yeah, I have $1 million in the bank or $100 million in the bank, but I'm alone and I'm lost and I'm hopeless. And I'm not saying earning money is bad. Please hear that. Earning $1 million is great. So is being present with your kids, if you have them, or your family. And if at the end of your life, for me, if I earned $1 million, but I did it at the expense of being present with my kids and being in a relationship with them, with my son, Matthew, I failed. Sorry, getting emotional. He's leaving for college this year. I'm like, I failed. That's not a wise choice. God's saying succeed at things that matter, and that's what God's calling us to. That's what D.L. Moody is pointing out to us. Don't be afraid of failure. Be afraid of trying and focusing your life and building your life on a foundation that's meaningless or doesn't matter or isn't going to work. Matthew 22:34 through 39. He answered it this way. He boils it all down for us. The Pharisees and the Sadducees are asking him, they're trying to trick him, but they're asking him, what's the greatest commandment of all the law? What's the greatest commandment? And this is Jesus' words. This is him boiled down on what his words are important, what's to do. And it's this. Teacher, he says, which is the greatest commandment in the law? That's what they ask. Jesus replies, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So it boils down to love God. And it says with all your heart, strength, mind. Love God with everything you have. All that you got. Love God. And love people. And loving God is hard. We try and figure it out and we mess it up. And loving people is hard. People are hard. We are hard to each other. We're difficult. But God says love him anyway. Love God and love people. Remember in the very beginning when we start talking about this parable, Jesus said, Matthew 7, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice, we have to do it. That person is like the wise man who built his house on the rock. We have to choose to hear God, understand, and to put it into practice. It's a choice to build wisely or to build foolishly. This is the choice of the foundation of the life we get to build. It comes down to this. Here's this image. I've used this many times, and I love it. It's simple, and I keep coming back to it, and I will always cherish this photo. And it's love God and love people on these two children's shoes. And it's simple. And that is the invitation that God invites us into. I'm going to send you out with this to end the day. Jeremiah 29:11-13 says this, "For I know the plans I have for you, says God," declares the Lord. "Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your hearts." May you seek God with all your heart today. May the life you're building be the one you want. And may it be the life that is ultimately meaningful and impactful. But that is God's plans for us. The great plans of hope and a future, of goodness, and with Him. Have a great day.